Welcome back to the Training Model Podcast. Just going to quickly enter this potty with a little bit of an introduction for Jack Edwards. You may know him as Metamorphosis Track Project on Instagram. He is a sprint coach from New South Wales here in Australia and just an amazing thinker, a lateral thinker with his ideas and his philosophies, but ultimately just a fantastic coach within speed development for athletics. So true speed, 1, 2, and I think 400s is what he's going through, and some hurdle-based things as well. So it's a fun conversation. We unpacked a bunch of stuff. My goal with these guest episodes is for me to try to learn how kind of my ideas around movement and training sort of coexist within different silos within the industry. So obviously speed coach, a lot of commonalities. So keen for you to check this one out. Obviously, before we get in, I'll also just let you know that things are really starting to move forward now with the training model and the product suite. All the links will be down below, but I have 5 spots left for the Wormhole pre-launch. This will be the last time it opens up. $150 gets you access to all of the content and everything forward up until the first week of November. From there onwards, there will be monthly and yearly subscription options. I've also just introduced a weekly live call, which will be on Wednesdays at 12 o'clock. I'm calling them Wednesday lunch. For all members of the Wormhole to ask questions and discuss. Open platform. We initially had a monthly Q&A, but I've decided to turn that into a weekly session to try to increase the engagement and the networking and the conversations that's happening within the Wormhole. So there's 5 spots open for the pre-launch. $150 gets all the content and everything up until the first week of November. Intake 3 of the mentorship will go live in the first week of November as well. So both the Wormhole and Intake 3 will launch at the same time because that will then be the start of the next phase. I would have built everything out in terms of the product suite and the offers and the ways in which you can get involved with me, my ideas and my processes with training models. So all of that information will be coming out on the socials. So please check all that stuff out if you're interested in either joining the Wormhole or Intake 3 of the Movement Mentorship. So now let's get into the episode with Jack. I think he was talking me through his favorite speed book on the mechanics of speed and running. So yeah, it's a fun episode and I hope that you enjoy it. I wanna learn about sprinting, man. I want to learn about the mechanics of sprinting. You just sent me a book here. Who's this book by? Ralph Mann. Who's that?
Ralph Mann. He is USA track and field biomechanist.
Yep.
So he's worked with multiple Olympic champions, Alison Felix, Sha'Carri Richardson, Sid McLaughlin. Like, if you can think of an American sprinter from 100 meters to 400 hurdles, he's worked with them.
Yeah. Who was the guy that ran really upright? What was his name? Michael Johnson? Was that him?
Johnson? Yeah. Yeah. Funnily enough, I actually don't think Michael Johnson.
No, that's all right.
That's his list of people that he's worked with, but he would break every rule. But Ralph,
this is some of the shit that I actually want to like from your own model. What are you looking at because I look at like a Michael Johnson and he just gets upright, and I just see this position, and it's so different to everyone else that's running. Like, what are you looking for? What are you looking at? I know you're like very heavily in the acceleration stuff, and my understanding is the shorter distances is mainly what you work with, but like what are the key things you're looking at with like I know that's a very general fucking broad thing, but like I've got my ideas for movement, the main things I'm looking at, but what are you kind of looking at?
Well, I mean, at the moment I'm coaching short sprints, 100, 200, and short hurdles and 400 meters as well.
Yep.
And then we've got some field sport guys. So, but there's a lot of commonalities between all of the events. But I would say that what I'm looking for is just dependent on the part of the race and the part of the sort of acceleration curve. So the rules that exist for the early parts of acceleration are kind of the opposite that exists at high velocity.
Yep.
So when you're looking for, like trying to overcome inertia when velocity is at 0 meters a second, there's going to be longer push times. The angle of the torso, the shin is going to be more positively oriented to apply force horizontally. And then as the athlete increases in speed over time, the ground contact time decreases, the flight time increases, and the postures adjust accordingly. So you'll find that some athletes really excel at those longer push times, longer times on the ground. Some athletes are more elastic in nature and they can continue to accelerate at increasingly smaller sort of time frames. So what I'm looking for ends up being very different person to person based on their strengths and weaknesses, because I do think that most people will have a tendency to like having, flight time, and some people will tend to enjoy having more ground contact time.
Yep.
And then you just try and find the strategies to make them more whole or to further strengthen their strengths.
Yeah, absolutely. When I used to do like heavy S&C work, like when I was like working at AFL clubs or one AFL club, but when I was like S&C coaching at VFL level and working with more like actual just general athletes, by the end of it, I probably did like 3 or 4 years of it. By the end of it, I kind of realized that strength itself as an output, like just like numbers, the process, the outcome of strength training actually didn't have that much of an impact. Is that something that you've like, so you're saying like these longer ground contacts, the general understanding would be that would be a strength expression, then obviously it's power, but it's how much force you can push into the ground. That's why it's a longer ground contact. You got more time to apply force. Do you think
Yeah,
strength itself as a quality has an impact?
it definitely does.
Yep.
It definitely does, but it just depends of what the time frame is expressed in. So the way I like to give more context about the sort of timeframes that we're talking about here, the first 2-3 steps, those first 3 steps are, about they're 2 times as long as they are at high velocity. So there may be 1.6 to 1 point, to 0.2. If you're really elite, it might be 1.14 milliseconds. So
Wow.
0.14 milliseconds first step. But for most of the guys and myself that I coach and myself, we're looking at like 0.16 to 0.2.
A little slower.
And
Yep.
it's a little slower. And then the proportions stay the same all the way. So a lot of the ground contact times that our guys will be at high speed will be maybe 0.1 to 0.95, but the elite of the elite, they get down to 0.85 sort of time frames. So when we're doing our strength training, we still go for these relatively arbitrary strength metrics, which most team sports or most strength and conditioning people advocate for. To, like a 2 times body weight
Standard.
squat, for example, trap bar deadlift 2 times body weight, something like that. And then just generally strong in a lunge and a hinge pattern as well. But then once you've hit that strength standard, let's say we're just looking to try and get good at applying those times, those high outputs in smaller and smaller time frames.
Yeah.
And so it's like how much force can we apply in 0.2 of a second, or even if it goes into 0.3 of a second, at least the gap is a little bit closer between what you're doing in the gym and on the track. And then if you're looking at the high speed stuff, like it's pretty difficult to express force in the gym at 0.09 like seconds.
Yeah.
So the transfer becomes increasingly less the higher velocity you go. So
Yeah.
that's why you see me doing all those like the short box, the short step ups, the cleans, which are really we're looking at trying to increase the rate of acceleration coming out of the eccentric into the concentric, because those lifts, the shorter range ones, have high acceleration metrics, and you will find that the time it takes to hit the highest velocity of the bar might be 0.2 or something like that.
Yeah. So it's closer.
So
It's just like it's literally just more specific to the application of force in that sense. And I'm assuming then, because I know you use like the metric VBT app. I don't know if you're using, or do you have a Tendo maybe?
I don't use the metric app,
Yeah.
or we used to have a Tender. I use a Barbell Mate at the moment.
Yeah.
I've used an eNode in the past, and I ordered some eNode last week. Yeah, so those are the sort of VBT devices that we use.
Are you looking at specific like VBT, like t peak time, time to velocity, like all of those, like Yeah. Is that stuff like, does that stuff become actually like important, or are you just simply going, we're doing a high box squat as fucking hard as you can? Like,
I think they're very important. So um, the way the way I interpret it is that every exercise is gonna have like the time to the peak velocity and the mean velocity, like all the sort of velocity metrics are going to be mostly determined by the range of motion of the exercise. So
yeah, true.
if you have a snatch, you have longer time to accelerate the bar, and so a snatch is always going to have higher velocity numbers than a clean or a squat or something like that. So you end up having the way I've sort of done it is you end up having a goal velocity, I guess, for each exercise, and then over time you look at how quickly do we hit this peak velocity.
Yeah.
So what you'll find is we'll train, say, a box squat, and they're hitting the velocities at like 1.2, 1.3 peak velocity, and they'll stagnate and hit that same 1.3, but the time at which they hit that 1.3 becomes quicker and quicker.
Yeah.
So
That
it's
makes,
like, when do we accomplish that peak velocity?
yeah.
And so then in the app, you'll also see what is peak acceleration.
Yeah. And
Um,
that's the main thing you're looking at.
yeah, so it's got to be a combination um, of a couple of metrics, but yeah, and then so once I'm kind of like happy with how quickly the force is being expressed, and perhaps that's when we can look at increasing load,
Yeah.
and continue to try and have that crazy high acceleration curve,
Yeah.
with more force.
And then I think it was you that was sharing it because we've been chatting a little bit in the DMs recently. But I think you were sharing this the single leg. Was that you? The
Mm.
Yeah. So, and again, like within my model and my understanding, very PRI influence. But this asymmetrical sort of loading of a more often than not the right side is um is going to be better at just like loading, just because of this asymmetrical stuff that's going on with the trunk. And I know that that's true in strength training and like pure strength training. And this is where you see a lot of like these hip shiftings and different loading strategies between left and right leg. And depending on how you structure movements and stuff, you can get better at expressing a more symmetrical force production. But very rarely are you going to have someone that just expresses purely symmetrical force production left and right side. And you were sharing that this left right asymmetrical thing can also be like a power, and like you've looked into the power stuff, or you've done like a little case study on yourself. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I think the post which you're referring to is just like a case for doing single leg power work.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's something that I was thinking about a little bit. So earlier this year we did, yeah, because one of the guys who we're coaching with, he was doing his honors project, and we were doing it on the use of GPS units in high velocity sprinting, and to see whether it was valid to use them as a speed measuring device. And so we're lucky that we're getting the athletes to run with these devices alongside the use of some validated speed measuring devices. And one of those included in that is something called Opto Jump. It's like $4,000 a meter. So to get access to it, it's really difficult. And so we're running with this thing on, and the part of OptiJump, it tells you, it gives you a stride profile for every step that you take in a sprint. So you can then track how long each stride is, how much time you're spending on the ground, how much time you're spending in the air, left to right, and then you can create some cool profiles with that. And what we were seeing is how most people had great differences in left to right, outputs. Left leg being better, able to get more stride length out of left or right or whatever it is. And so then it just kind of made me start to, and then when we're doing some single-legged lifts in the gym, we're sort of seeing the same sort of thing where
Yeah.
we were doing step ups, for example, and we're measuring the speed and outputs of the step ups, and maybe left side stronger and the right side stronger, or the left side's weaker, whatever it is. And I thought this was interesting. because when we were doing some of the more heavy strength stuff, like heavy reverse lunges or heavy single leg press and stuff, we weren't really seeing the same sort of discrepancy. And
Yeah.
it was when it was things were starting to be asked to be coordinated at higher speeds and with greater power that the discrepancy became increasingly bigger. And so it was just making me wonder, like, why this is the case. Like, say if we got someone on like a leg extension or a heavy lunge or heavy single leg press, kind of be pretty similar in the weights that we can use. Why was it occurring at higher speeds or jumps? Um,
And what
yeah,
do you think? My brain would go to it. It would be a coordination based thing.
yeah,
Like, do you reckon that's what that would be?
I think so. Yeah, that's that's what I think. And then it just made me wonder how many times are we asking to have the body to have like to coordinate high amounts of power, left to right, or then we started doing stride drills, which held both legs accountable to having um, good distances. Like we didn't really want one leg to not work and the other leg working. So if we just have all that sort of stuff, because if you're losing a centimeter on one leg for every stride and you're taking like 50 strides in a race, and that's like
It's a
it's a
turn.
lot.
It's
Yeah.
basically a turn every stride. You're turning. You're counteracting a direction that's no longer straight. Yeah.
And and the other interesting thing it actually became a bit of a discussion in the comments section of that, because the flexible um Jeff Wolf, if we was sort of talking about, is commenting how asymmetries are normal, this, that, and the other. All athletes have them and stuff, and he's right. Like the literature says that. I think our eyeballs say that. But oftentimes the limitations of these um, viewpoints is that they're going to be observing it through like the kinematic lens and measuring joint angle changes in the runner. So left leg does this, right leg does this. And unless we have the sort of kinetic underpinnings, we don't actually know what those asymmetries are.
Just going to take a very quick break here to let you know that I have two programs on offer through Training Model. We have a squat and a deadlift program, and then we also have a bench press and reach program. These programs are kind of like mini resources for you to start to learn my ideas around training and programming and movement and the key principles. Both of them come with about 2 hours worth of education. There's like 45 exercises in the tutorials, about 20 odd per program. So you can check everything out from there and start to see how I'm viewing and framing both movement and programming. So that will be the first link down below. If you're interested, I'd highly recommend checking that out. Yeah.
If that does that make sense? And
Yeah.
so, and we often sort of make assumptions where if a foot is landing in this position, or if there's differences in the way it looks side to side, that there must be differences in the performance side to
Yeah.
side. But I don't
Output
actually
left.
think,
Yeah.
yeah, but I don't know if that's entirely true or if that's entirely the case. And so that's why I really started to like looking at the sort of outcome as opposed to the action as much, and having access to that data kind of flipped my mind a bit, because when we look back at the footage of it, it was really difficult to decipher what is the
Yeah.
why is this leg not going as far as the other leg, for
Yeah,
example.
I'd be fascinated to see how that would play out. Because obviously, like the output would be like power into the ground or whatever. But if one side is constantly doing more or expressing more force or more range or whatever, like ultimately that is like, yeah, the body can compensate and create the outcome and the task, and it will just do the job. But surely in terms of like fucking performance, they're like bringing that into a more unified. It just makes sense that it would help. Yeah, but we're always battling like this asymmetrical underpin of just the human system. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know, like it. Yeah, it'd be fascinating. It'd be interesting to see like an elite person if their left and right leg high force, high speed, power is more symmetrical than what would you call the average person that you're helping? Like what are they elite? Are they Australian elite? Are they like state elite? Are they like Like, what level are
I
they?
wouldn't say they're elite.
No,
Because no, no,
state
like
level.
what is elite? I
Like
mean,
state level, like
no,
obviously
they can
elite
run at
is like,
nationals.
yeah, yeah.
They can run at nationals. So
That,
they
I would call that elite.
yeah, but I'm like
Yeah, but you zoom
I'm
out. Yeah, you go out
harsh. Yeah.
to the world level and go, yeah. Well, yeah, that's just the Australian population. But you're dealing with the Australian elite. They're at national level. Like that is elite.
I guess so. But it's another because I'm like I can run at a national level.
You're elite,
But
man.
I'm a jabroni.
Nah, shut the fuck up. You're elite. Wait, you need to believe it for it to happen, man. You
Oh,
are elite.
I'm just real with it. Yeah, but what they like look, I think
Because well, hang on. I got all right. So if you're saying that there's a discrepancy in force application between like we'll call them sub elite. I think you're elite, but a sub elite sprinter, it has a longer force production in the acceleration phase, and it is relative. It's sort of like relatively rolls forward into this the top speed in terms of time on the ground and all of that. I would imagine then that the elite, let's use I don't want to who's Noah Lyles, is that his name?
yep.
Yeah, if we go a Noah Lyles and we know that his ground contact forces are faster, he accelerates quicker, he spends less time on the ground in both the acceleration and the top speed. I would imagine then that his discrepancy between left and right legs would be probably closer than what a sub elite lifter would be as well, or a sub elite sprinter. That their discrepancies between left and right would be relatively greater than what the elite would be as well.
That's my assumption because I don't know how you could like. Do you want me to show you
Absolutely.
what this looks like
Absolutely.
quickly?
Advanced sharing options, all participants. Go for it. Let's turn this into a lecture. I'm actually fascinated with this shit. Yeah,
So
if
conducive
you're,
to
hang on, I'll just make a preface and I'll put this at the start as well. But if you're listening to this audio, it might be worth jumping on the YouTube channel and sussing
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So how about I move?
What are we looking at here?
Okay, yeah, what are we looking at here? Okay. Okay, I tried zooming out so the
That's
name's
fine. That's
there, but
good.
anyway,
That's good.
whatever. They've seen this, so it's okay. So this is what it kind of tells you. Like this is the information that you get from the device. So you get flight time, contact time.
Opto jump.
Yeah, the step. You get the velocity of every step and how long each.
So it's
What?
literally between left and right leg. You're looking at all of
Yeah,
the metrics left versus right side. Yep.
yeah. So this athlete is one of our faster female athletes, and you can see that there's a positive contribution left to right, and each step. So the red is the contact time,
Yep.
and the blue is the flight time. And then it would be what would have been good is if we overlaid the velocity on top. But anyway, you can see how every leg that it sequences, so it decreases in contact time and
Yep.
increases in flight time. That's pretty good. Um, and then say this is me. Like I start really high ground contact time and start to work it, and you can see left to right things are sort of bouncing around. One
Yeah.
athlete here, up down, up down, up down, up down. Um, but the point of ground contact time still continues to go down.
Yep.
And this guy is a NRL, is a rugby league guy,
Yep.
and maybe it's a good case point for just the profiles of different athletes because he plays prop. So, ground contact time, the sort of sequencing is very similar, long to short. But because these athletes aren't as elastic, the flight time can't really go with it. So at some stage in an elite sprinter, this flight time will overlap the ground contact time
Makes
and will
sense.
exceed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it just varies,
So
like,
go back to your one. So you know how your one is a little up down,
yeah.
or
Yeah.
whoever that one was with the blue line going up and down, up and down. So that's
Oh, yeah.
literally left and right legs creating different velocities.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when you look at the speed, and there would be an assumption that every step is contributing
Is
to.
accelerating.
Yeah, but it's not
It's
necessarily the case. There are stages in which actually this one's all right, but say in
So if you go back to that up down one, which leg is not producing the acceleration, or which leg is doing? Is it the left
It's
or the right?
flight time. It is. So the right leg, it's all over the shop. So we've got left leg, flight time is 0.9. So we're in the air for more time using our right leg, which would give me the indication that they can create more vertical propulsion.
So they're
Right leg,
pushing
and then
harder with the right leg.
yeah, and then the left leg, there's less flight time.
Is that the same with everyone? Go to another one.
Are you trying to see if this fits into like a PRI
This is
setting?
no. This is literally what I want to. I want to like get
Yeah.
technical with people and just see if these things are true everywhere.
Right, right's not as much. Right, right, right. Versus, left.
So
Left is a little bit longer.
left leg is
Ground.
creating more. Yeah.
Yeah. So left leg, sorry, right leg, not in the air as long, and also on the ground for longer.
Yeah. So it's pushing for longer.
It's
Yeah.
pushing for longer, and the byproduct isn't even as good. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it is interesting. It
And
definitely starts making
what would be your strategy to it to
to
if
address it.
yeah, if the hypothesis is correct that if we can create symmetry in the force production, speed of contact and flight time and all that, if we could turn this person into a perfectly symmetrical output, what would
Mhm.
be the process? You'd go to like high velocity, high power, single leg stuff.
Yeah, just I think the first thing for me was just to become conscious of it.
Yeah.
I didn't really, we're just guessing, but I didn't really know, and I didn't know how much it changed. And then what the change, what we sort of made conscious of it was, um, yeah, like that sort of single. We need both a combination of the double leg stuff, which I think is really important to create this neurological changes and force and power and stuff. But it needs to be accompanied with some single leg stuff, and that's the same with jumping. Using a lot of jumping exercises, hopping, bounding. Um,
Do you use
ex-
the McInnes Watson sort of framework for plyos?
no, not really, but I haven't taken his course or anything like that. Not to say it's bad or good or whatever, but
It just
it's
seems
just
to be
it doesn't.
the popular. It seems to be the popular framework at the moment.
I guess for the time being, it's like the only plyometric framework, and I think it's from what I've seen, it seems pretty adaptable to a lot of environments. But
What about the stick? Learn the stick for 3 months, and then go to one lateralization, and then like you do these little fucking yeah.
the stick sucks.
The
Like
stick
I
sucks, man. The
like
stick sucks.
we're talking about like power and stuff. Like anything that slows it down and doesn't teach you to get
Yeah,
out of it.
yeah.
Like I don't get it.
I get it
But
for like literally fresh juniors just learning to
yes,
coordinate their body, but outside of that, what are we doing? What are we
you
doing?
need as long as you have a clear progression model in anything,
Yeah. And
and you know where it's going, it's
I
all
can't
good.
I
But
can't remember who said it, but someone was like, literally, the progression of plyometrics is just the progression of plyometrics. As you get better at them, your body produces more force and needs to absorb more force.
it's
Like you
it's
literally
built into the system.
built
Yeah.
in. Like, why are we fucking compartmentalizing these positions and these things to slow it down? And then you get to motor programming and all this. Like, you're just adding blocks to this process that should be autonomous. Like, yeah, crazy.
I'd say
Um,
the way to make plyometrics harder is just to speed it up,
you just
speed up
jump
the
up.
eccentric. You jump off something higher, or you get pulled faster. But
Yeah.
you just end up doing that anyway. You
Yeah.
don't really need to go that far with it.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. What's a typical like strength session look like for you and your sprinters in the gym? Like obviously, are you guys in competition or you'd be coming into the competition season now? No?
yeah, yeah, we'll start competing in about a month for some
Yeah.
of them. For most of my guys, to be honest, they're mid-20s and they all went to Europe in the middle of what should be the off season. So as much as I want them to compete next month, a lot of them they need to continue training. But our strength is very, very basic. We've got two strength sessions a week at the moment. I could show it, and
Do you do much upper body strength work and like power work?
we definitely have in the past. But now I could now it's like I just don't care about it that much now because the running program
Yeah.
has gotten even harder. So
Okay.
it's just as simple as this. We've got 5 exercises: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's just we've got I consider 2 of them to be strength or power exercises, and
Yeah.
then the rest are just a bit of resilience work.
Yeah.
And then so one of them, if we're talking about the VBT shit, I guess one of them probably has a greater acceleration sort of component to it, and one of them has a lot greater sort of velocity component to it. So these sort of like hang pulls or snatch pulls and stuff like that, the longer ranges of motion continue to pull through a longer period of time, and box squats and step ups are shorter, chodier acceleration based movements.
Yeah.
Um, and then and then I guess within the program, like we do a lot of I do a lot of like ply, circuits, abdominal circuits. Like I just build them into the warm up,
Yeah.
and it just or say on like an off day, which is just an aerobic sort of recovery day, like we might do a lot of the hamstring resilience stuff or groin stuff. But at this stage, we did a full general preparation phase, which had a lot of generic weightlifting exercises and a lot of hypertrophy, like
Standard
hamstring
stuff. Yeah.
curls,
All standard
all
stuff.
that sort of stuff. But now we're running really fast and we're running a lot. So I can't really do as much of that stuff.
Yeah.
And
So
the
so
gym
two
becomes very
so
basic.
mainly just in this period of time, two strength sessions, but one of them's a
Yeah.
little bit more acceleration, one of them's a little bit more like velocity based.
Like, yeah, I'd say, yeah, I actually, both of them have more of a acceleration one and one has a bit more velocity. And so I've got two main lifts, one acceleration, one
Oh, sorry, I
velocity.
gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I like about 8 sets,
Yep.
somewhere between like 6 and 10 sets of those main two exercises. And
Yep. And
yeah.
then do you have like go-to exercise like bias? I want some bias. Like what are the
Mm.
things that you really like you put a lot of value in and the movements or the positions that you like loading and like you find value in?
Um, Squat
Yeah.
is probably number one.
To a box, high box?
I we've got to hit a proper box, like it's probably without a box, like just parallel.
Yep.
If we haven't hit that, then we don't whip out the box or
Yep.
anything like that. So we had like 9 weeks to hit a PB squat, and if you didn't hit 2 times body weight squat, you just keep on going at it
Just stay there.
until
Yeah.
you just keep working through it. So I like squats. My favorite butt exercise is a barbell reverse lunge. I think
Oh
it's
yeah.
the best.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's the best.
Yep.
And obviously, as far as just I like hang cleans and I like power cleans and stuff. But to be honest, um the more I'm getting understanding the S&C, the less of it I'm doing. And
Oh really? Yeah.
yeah, because we're just not lifting it. I just don't know if it matters as much as having a very comprehensive jumping and sprinting program. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I think,
I imagine. Yeah.
yeah, but in the past I used to just do everything all the time. But
Yeah.
but I think you can't beat the basics of bench, squat, and a pull, like and then a fat lunge,
And a
and you're
fat
probably good
lunge.
to go.
And a
Yeah.
big reverse lunge. From like this is just my very rudimentary understanding of sprint work, but like or like injuries of sprint, like hamstring would be one that makes a lot. Is it are you doing specific like resilience work for
Mm.
hamstring?
Yeah. I mean,
Like what's the most
yeah,
common sprinting injury?
it's definitely hamstrings. Yeah,
Yeah.
soft tissue,
Yeah.
um, hamstring, usually bicep fem,
Yeah.
and yeah. Then there's like adductor and anything around the calf, whether it's Achilles or in the 400 meters, soleus is really big. But yeah, we do some hamstring stuff. Like that's where we sort of the off season for us early on. We're not running at high velocity, and that's our opportunity to develop eccentric hamstring strength.
Yep.
So 2 up, 1 down hamstring curls, regular hamstring curls, and I love back extensions.
Yep.
I think they're one of my favorite hamstring exercises.
Bias.
But now,
Love it. Yeah.
yeah, like really proper heavy back extensions are awesome.
Yeah.
But now it's kind of like on maintenance to a
Yeah.
certain degree.
Yeah.
And
Because the sprint work does it.
yeah, because if we're looking at the 2 up, 1 down hamstring curl or even a Nordic, like the positive adaptations come from it being super maximal in nature. And that's strong eccentric stress is what creates the adaptation. But once we're running at high velocity, like every stride is like a super maximal
Yeah.
hamstring,
It's more than you
exercise.
can ever get out of the gym. The gym.
Yeah. And so I kind of, that's when I like just, things like sliders and gliders and bridges and things like that. I just sort of keep it in. Um, it's a bit of pump work. And I think it's good to have also endurance. You know,
Yeah.
the guy Dr. Mike, who I coach with, like he's got this theory that a lot of the time the bicep fem goes just because the semi mem and the semi ten have just run out of their
Yeah.
capacity, and
Essentially.
then it just sort of goes through bicep fem, and
Yeah.
I trust him, and it makes sense to me. So
Well,
that's
it
why,
makes sense.
yeah,
The load has to go somewhere, and if the other stuff is starting to fatigue and whatever, but people
yeah.
tell you the biomechanics and all that sort of stuff doesn't really matter. But yeah.
Well, and to go to the biomechanics, like if we're talking about hamstring injury risk, it's the I would say that the negative outcome of a lot of like the literature on it is probably put a greater emphasis towards eccentric strength being the answer to reduction in hamstring injuries. But if we look at hamstring injuries across football and AFL and stuff, they're still very prominent, and I actually don't think we've made any like headway into solving them.
I don't think we understand injury mechanism at all.
Yeah, and this is something I often hesitate to talk about because I just am like a track coach, and I think people who work in rehab should know this better than me. But my guess is, eccentric hamstring strength is it's just one of like 5, 6, 7 factors, like biomechanics, fatigue. Um, if you just have a lot of if you do, so for us, right, with hamstrings, we just have one maximal velocity per week at the moment, and we might even pull that back if the intensity goes up. Because that's just how stressful it is. And
Yeah. No, it makes sense.
yeah,
I actually think that our understanding of the injury mechanism is like obviously like the classic catch-all is like, yeah, you couldn't tolerate the load. I don't even think people understand what load is. But no shit, like absolutely, but like there's so many factors that feed into that. I don't think we'll ever get the answer of like it's gonna and trying to boil it down. And anytime a part of the industry takes wind, and the classic one is the Nord board and the Nordic hamstring. Anytime that a part of the industry takes wind and like capitalizes capitalistic markets, like one area of the research in terms of like this is it and all of that, like my red flags just go through the roof, and I'm like, well, hang on. Like now it's the money, and then we get into fucking tin hat and all this sort of shit. But yeah,
I think the tin hat's warranted.
yeah, like it just as
Yeah.
soon as there's products and shit that feed into it, like it just straight away, hang on. I don't think we're actually, yeah.
And then, what people do with that information once they acquire the technology as well is interesting. Like, you know, it's really easy to. So we've done a lot of Nord board testing and stuff like that. I think it could be valid, but I could see how you can completely rig it to just. Firstly, like the literature says like I think it's about 550 watts total output for minimization of hamstring tear injuries or something.
Yeah.
Very low threshold. It's like it's not much. It's not that strong, and you can just manipulate it. You can manipulate a Nord board to just completely. You can spike eccentric load with
Yeah. So
increasing velocity, right? So you can just do whatever the hell you want with the thing, fit
well,
whatever
I've got a mate. I
narrative
might,
you
I
want to
might
say.
get him on. Jared Kay, who runs the Six Principal around the corner here. He's also the high performance manager, or maybe like the head of strength at Richmond Women's AFL.
I
I
bumped
went in
into
there.
him a few years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
When
He,
I was in town for the AFL Grand Final with the Swans, and I
yeah,
saw him at the track, and he shouted me a lunch at
He's the best, man. I used to live with him. Yeah,
Schnitzel,
yeah.
the sandwich at the spot around. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
Marcos.
good.
My James George, who's my intern, he was asking me questions around Nordboard and Nordic eccentrics and all this sort of shit, and chatting about the hamstring stuff. And I was like, I think what the uni is kind of like feeding you, I don't think actually plays out in application. And then just randomly we went to Jared's gym around the corner. And he had it out, and he had all the data because he runs it with the women. I should get him on to discuss some of this stuff. But he was saying that exact thing, that players literally learn how to manipulate, and it comes to center of mass. You can manipulate where your positioning is, and you can increase the force representation in the Nord board, but you actually haven't changed the fucking loading. The players literally learn how to do it. That's what you're seeing as the increase in the Nord board numbers. And he's like, it gets to a point where the number no longer actually means anything, and it just like caps out. And it's like once you pass that, there's no more reason to be doing it. And they use it as a reactive tool. I should get him on to chat about it. They use it as a reactive tool when discrepancies between left and right start coming in. So he's literally, they play their games and they test, and when there's a discrepancy left of right that crosses a threshold, that's what they're viewing as the important data. It's got nothing to do with the force
With
output.
the total. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got nothing to do with any of that stuff. It's a reactive thing of like a discrepancy left and right, which is the biggest thing they're looking at, which is really interesting. Um, yeah, I thought it was.
I think it's good, at least in the sense, if you have something
You got
as a
something.
normative data, like where it's like, this is what this person's normal is, and their asymmetry is usually within this bandwidth, and the usual force application is like around this. And if you see a big drop off or a big left to right change, that's when like some red flags should be going off.
Yeah,
But
I'll
other
get
than
him.
that,
I
yeah,
might get him on to chat about it properly because I was fascinated by the actual application of it that just completely contradicted what most people's understanding of the eccentric loading of the hamstring actually is. So yeah, I thought that was cool. But let's get back to sprinting. Um, I've got some questions around the acceleration phase because I have ideas within force production in strength work, and I think they marry over to. It would make sense. Um, what my view? Tell me if I'm wrong. Rudimentary understanding of acceleration and top end. Acceleration, you want to stay low to keep the shin forward so you can apply horizontal force for longer. Is that correct?
yeah, it sounds
So
pretty
if
bang
you
on.
if you stay lower for longer, you can apply more horizontal force. Is that, and you're trying to minimize early extension. You're trying to minimize how quickly someone comes up. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd say for the most part, that's pretty spot on. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're trying to stay low in the acceleration, and then there's almost like a period, I don't know how far, maybe like 15 to 20 meters in, where all of a sudden you get upright and then you start the top speed mechanics. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say it's like an all of a sudden thing. And I also wouldn't say you just stay low. Like every step actually has to change.
Yeah.
So, you know, say you exit at 45 degrees, maybe the torso angle next one's going to be, 48, 51, blah, blah, blah. And so if you have a first step which starts off quite low, then it gives you a greater bandwidth to work through, gives you more,
You've
I don't
got
know,
more, yeah, you've got
you,
more
you got
relative room to move into.
yeah. Whereas if someone exits at, say, 70 degrees, then you
Like
give
they
yourself
pop
giving
straight.
yourself, like 15 degrees of movement. But yeah, for the most part, acceleration, horizontal force application, and then as you transition into high velocity sprinting, it's going to be more vertical in nature.
Yeah. How long is that transition from out of the blocks to get to your 90 degrees up? I know everyone's different, but like, what's the general acceleration period of a 100-meter race?
Um, Varies greatly. For
Yeah.
me, for me, like it takes me maybe um, 60 meters or so to hit top speed,
Yep.
or I think it's like 55 to 60 meters. But the early acceleration, right? So acceleration isn't uh,
Linear.
it's not linear. Yeah, it sort of has the early acceleration will be extremely sharp, and then it peters off. And that's reflected in the way in which people accelerate. So there's early, say, 10 meters or so, be quite sharp, and then even by 20 or so meters, people will start to be quite upright, but you're still able to produce horizontal force. So, um, yeah, I would say the
Interesting.
acceleration
Yeah.
phase lasts a decently long time for a lot of people, and that's usually determined by their maximal velocity, how fast they run. Like, Usain Bolt, would take a very long time to hit his max
Oh,
velocity
that would
because,
that
and
would be
it's
my next question.
yeah,
Are the elite of the elite hitting top speed later?
yeah, because it just takes a long time to get there.
Yeah.
Say if your max velocity is at eight meters a second or something like that versus 12.6, the rate of accelerate, like the graph will still look relatively similar,
It looks the same. It's just
but
elongated.
it just continues to keep
Yeah.
on going. And so yeah, to answer your question, how long does it take for people to get up? I don't know. Let's say
Well,
like
that's
somewhere between
been it.
20
It
and
was
30
mainly
minutes.
just
Yeah.
my understanding of like the acceleration phase is dominant by horizontal force production, which is why you see the ground contacts longer, which is why you see the forward shin angle and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Like I remember I just saw on Instagram recently, like it was some gym and they had like this floating pillow thing above the sprint, and everyone was like, talk about constraints and fucking blah blah blah. And I was like,
Right.
and like the whole idea of like staying low. But the main question that I have is, are you trying to minimize extension into the trunk through the acceleration phase? Are you trying to actually get people
Flex people over.
not flex, but are you trying to just minimize the early extension of the trunk? Is that a
Yeah.
consideration?
Yeah. It can definitely happen. Um,
Because like when I look
okay.
at like if I just like a whoever, like an acceleration image, like I'm seeing actually a flexed posture when I view those things, I'm seeing this like more
So
flexed, hunched. I know they're moving forward, but it makes sense to me with my understanding of force production that you want to minimize the extension of the trunk as long as you can.
yeah. So as I said, every step you want to get faster. And if you go into too much extension, say through thoracic, or even if they're trying to, okay, I'll reframe it. So when we're coming out of the block, so we're starting to accelerate, it's an extension pattern through the hips, the knees, the ankles,
Yep.
and, you're flexing your shoulder and extending the other shoulder
Yeah.
and stuff like that. What a lot of people do will sort of take this opportunity, which is like aggressive extension of the hips, and it becomes very global in nature, and you'll see their chin
Yeah.
also go up, you'll see their thoracic extend and stuff like
The
that.
pelvis just
and,
goes forward.
and yeah, then you sort of get that anterior tilt, and what will happen is the cycle of the foot won't be able to recycle into an effective position to continue to accelerate
Because
because
they're
the
because they've extended.
because they've extended.
Because they can't
Exactly
get the
right.
leg back through.
Yeah, so the pelvis isn't in a good position to get the hip to flex up and then come back and hit the ground at a good angle. So
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of the time I'm sort of encouraging them to sort of, even in their block starts, have kind of, I tell them to push through the ground, and it won't be like a full protraction of the shoulders and stuff like that.
It
But
drives their trunk backwards.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So the pelvis is in a slightly more neutral position in the blocks, and so they can actually flex their hip into a better position. So to answer your question, yeah, I guess we just want to be able to put the athlete in the right position to continue to accelerate, and
Yeah.
that might be in I kind of want that in a, I want the hips and the knees to extend, but I don't want everything to extend with it. It's got to be segmented appropriately
Yeah.
to
If the
the right joint.
Because it makes complete sense. If the trunk extends and the pelvis dumps forward into an
Yes.
anterior tilt, you can't get your leg back up in time.
No, the cycle will happen behind the body, as
Yeah.
in the foot cycle happens behind the body as opposed to under and slightly in front.
Yeah, which makes complete sense. Yeah, that's what I thought would have been going on. So you're not purposely coaching the early extension of the trunk out of them, but you're setting them in a way where it almost can't happen.
Yeah, that's the goal. So
Yeah.
we make sure the block setting's good and just on your marks good. And
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of the time I'll like be very tactile and like, stroke their upper back as they're in like, on their marks, like just like relax. So you go like,
Sensory.
round it a little bit.
Yeah, sensory
Uh,
stuff. I love that.
yeah.
Another question then for me. when we're upright in max velocity, higher speed, and all of that sort of stuff, has does that focus of the trunk extension, is that minimized? And then all of a sudden we're looking at a significantly relatively more extended posture when upright, and actually like when horizontal force is no longer the goal, but it's now just like peak time and going. Is that change?
It doesn't really change, to be honest,
Change that.
because even if the force vectors change, the goal is very much the same for the athlete, if this makes sense. So you kind of want the leg to come in, they want the femur to come in front of the body and then to hit back underneath the center of mass.
Yeah.
As you increase in speed, it becomes increasingly difficult to do so, because if you're an athlete traveling at, say, 10 meters a second down the track, then
Horizontal.
your femur has to drive back
Faster.
faster than 10 meters a second.
Yeah.
And then so it's at the stage at which the athlete can no longer create the negative foot speed, or the thigh angular velocity drops off. That's when they begin to create more braking forces and propulsive forces. And so, you know, that same principle of having the pelvis in a relatively neutral position, so you're able to actually recycle the leg, and the femur can get in front of the body to then come back down and under. And you can,
Yeah, makes sense.
you're not putting so much stress on the hamstring, and
Yeah.
you can actually utilize, all the, this is all the stuff which I'm chatting about on week. So I'm glad you're asking me. Yeah. So the even if the force vector changed, the intention of the athlete remains the same. Like,
Is the same. Yeah, which makes
yeah.
complete sense.
So the kinematics are always kind of horizontal in nature, but the kinetics change as you
Yeah,
gain
absolutely.
speed.
Yeah, and yeah, you're gaining speed, and the position of the body is changing that. Yeah, that makes sense. And then again, rudimentary understanding of like true sprint training. I'm always seeing things of loaded sprinting and sled work and all of that sort of stuff. My assumption would be that there would be a point at which too much load changes the mechanics and it becomes detrimental to the. Do you see any value in loaded sprint work?
Yeah, I do. Uh,
And for what outcome? Like,
mm,
what are you viewing it as?
okay, so it just loads can vary a lot. So I always like to specify what that means, because like all the JB Marins, Cam Joss stuff, like
I don't know.
JB Marin's like the lead researcher in resisted sprinting,
Yeah,
and I think he's probably one of the most cited sports scientists in the world.
yeah.
And he's advocated for up to 50% body weight load, which
50%.
yeah,
Wow. Okay.
or yeah, and then even if you're looking with some devices which can measure the force outputs, horizontal force outputs like 1080s and stuff. It's
Yeah.
at like 50% velocity decrement in which peak power is accomplished.
Yeah.
But not many track coaches do this intuitively, because I think as you said, it kind of dements the sprint mechanics. But
Yeah, that would be my
I first,
understanding. Yeah.
yeah. But to be honest, I actually really like going quite heavy for a certain period of time. Like 30, 40 kilos on a tartan track, so that the friction coefficient's still quite high.
Yeah.
And why I like it is because acceleration, as we talked about, is about organizing forces horizontally. And if the athlete isn't very good at coordinating this, and they've got a sled pulling them horizontally, posteriorly, they won't be able to move the force. They won't be able to move the sled forward if they're not coordinating the forces horizontally. And it's almost a bit, I think of it as like the porridge is too hot, the porridge is too cold. Can we get the porridge a little bit too hot? Oh crap, that threw me upwards or it threw me forwards. And then they can use that as a learning tool to then push horizontally, and then over time, strip the weight off it and have something which greater reflects the sprint mechanics. um, but yeah, this is, to be honest, something which I want to get better at with better technology as well, because now they can be quite precise in understanding the load output relationship
Yeah.
in sprinters, and a lot of people doing assisted acceleration and all this sort of stuff. And just
Yeah,
curious.
because then that's the opposite, which is like a band or something pulling you forward. Correct?
Yeah,
like an
the
overspeed training or whatever they call it.
yeah, with the muscle lab or
Yeah, whatever.
1080 stuff. It's like, to be honest, I'm pretty horny for it. Like it's pretty, it's pretty. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah,
But I just don't have access to that on a regular basis and
yeah, that's fair. Yeah, all the
stuff like
stuff.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, because that would be, and I would assume that the loaded sprinting stuff would be. It makes more sense to be the acceleration phase dominant thing. Like that's where that makes the most sense.
yeah, yeah. I mean, a big part about acceleration is overcoming inertia,
Yeah,
and so I kind of view a lot of the resisted acceleration stuff as it's almost just like it's like strength training, specific strength training,
yeah, yeah,
and we're getting better at overcoming inertia
yeah,
and coordinating forces horizontally, and those are two big pillars of good acceleration.
yeah. Nah, I rate it. All right, that covered all of my just my questions around sprinting and all of that sort of stuff. I know you just recently ran a mentorship. How'd you go?
We're still in the thick of it.
Still in it?
I'm halfway through it. I'm enjoying it. Yeah,
What have you learned? What have you learned running the mentorship?
I guess you were saying something similar recently about how much effort you underestimate how much effort it takes putting resources together.
Yeah,
Uh, mm, I think it's definitely helped me it helps solidify your understanding of things. To me, it reinforced my love for education and why I liked, why I wanted to be an English teacher to begin with, and why I
yeah,
wanted to be a coach, and that's to try and help people understand some things. Um, and yeah, it also kind of reinforced why I wanted to do it is because I don't really think there's many avenues to undertake this kind of education to understand sprinting.
yeah,
It's not many people do it, and I think it's really important if you're working in sports. So, um, but yeah, and I don't know, pretty poor answers there. But I'd say the thing which is always the best thing about this is chatting to people around the mentorship, and not necessarily just in the calls. Chatting with someone about their career prospects or their own problems that they're trying to solve. And
yeah.
I like that just as much as getting people to understand some good sprint stuff.
Yeah. Just
I think it's
like-minded
nice.
people discussing.
Just
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's a dynamic which I really enjoy.
Yeah. I know you're a very like philosophical coach that has like abstract sort of ideas that blend into the framework of coaching and the process of coaching. Uh, I used to get very deep, very quickly with my education stuff, with some of like the more zoomed out principles that are like over governing of just ideas in general that we then apply as C and strength training and coaching in from. Uh, what was your structure to get some of those ideas in? Like, did you outline those ideas at the start or are they bled into it? Did you like provide like your governing principles at the start? Like, how have you got your like more zoomed out, just global ideas into the content? Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
I did it week one,
you did
like
it straight away.
mostly because it's a thing which has like kept me up at night and kept me. Um, it's a thing which I wish I addressed at an earlier stage in my coaching career. Like I sort of told my story about how I got into coaching and what my belief systems were, and they were very. And it wasn't really until I started to solidify a system or a philosophy in which I started to actually get good results and actually started to enjoy the coaching experience more. And so I kind of set it as a priority that in order to enjoy coaching, you have to have a good system.
You have to think about these
Um,
things. Yeah,
you got to think about these things immediately. And I kind of said, how did I form my coaching philosophy? And for me, in my experience, in my context, like it just came from having a deeper understanding of the sport and um, even this book, so the Ralph Mann book, like the first um, chapter is called "Physics Doesn't Care," And I like that because it's like if you have a really good understanding of the sport, the science behind it, and then a really good understanding about how to identify the strengths and weaknesses of your athlete. If you pair those together, you'll be able to create really good
Yeah.
coaching outcomes.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we talked a fair bit about.
Yeah. I like it. I love it. How long is it?
It's a 6 week thing.
Six
So,
weeks. Yeah.
and to be honest, like the first week is philosophy and uh, coaching systems and then it's acceleration and speed, and then the rest is like strength and conditioning and elastic development and competition and athlete
Stuff.
monitoring. So, um, and the funny part about it is that I think only one person in the thing was just six of us to begin with, but only one person then coach track and field sprinters, and the rest just interested. you know, the,
That's what you'll
you
get.
know.
You will, and
So
you'll get it, and it
yeah.
will grow. It will grow more with those people. The people, and we were talking about this off air at the very start, but some people just fucking want knowledge, man. They just want to understand very particular things, and yeah, it's mad.
What I have enjoyed a lot about it is that I talk about something one week, and then after the systems chat to start with, someone hits me up and says, "Hey, I've been able to apply this. This is where my mind's going with it." The next week, talk about acceleration, and then half of the people are sending me videos of themselves accelerating down at the park, and I'm like, "Yeah, I tried this, I tried that." I'm like, "This is exactly what I want." Like
Yeah,
you got to take these things and apply them.
yeah,
It's the best.
I love it. No, it's mad. I'm keen to hear how it all ends up. What's your plan with them? How often are you gonna? Do you want to run like
Oh, just got to
I don't
get
know?
through the first one
Yeah,
first. But then I think
yeah, like a
I
couple
think
times.
yeah, maybe 2 or 3 times a
Yeah,
year. Like it'd be cool to do it. Maybe early next year.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
Just build it
yeah,
up.
yeah. I mean, I'm pretty bad at business in general, like and being sticking to a deadline and stuff like that. So I think I should just preset some dates for 2025 and give people enough heads up and just rip in.
Yeah. And the other thing, I know you had an ebook come out with a program for acceleration and stuff. How's that been going?
Oh, that was good. That's over a year ago now, and was able to sell like 150 odd copies, which for me, I'm like didn't really do a whole lot of too much marketing or anything like that. But I think it's a good simple way to understand the demands of acceleration. But it's just funny how a year on, there are things which I wish I said and the things which I wish I didn't say in it. So
Doing
you
update.
just leave it alone. It,
No,
it
just do an
exists
update.
there. And you just do it after at a later stage. Yeah.
Yeah. If people wanted to buy that book, where could they go and see the stuff that you no longer want? If you, yeah, where can they find that? I'm assuming
It's
just
just
bio.
it's on my Instagram. Yeah, just in the bio. It's like it's $29. So it's a good read on the train and program attached as well. So yeah,
Yeah, lovely, awesome. Thank you very much for coming on, man. I greatly
pleasure.
appreciate it. Thanks for helping me better understand this stuff from my lens, but I do appreciate it. I'll have all your links and stuff in the show notes for everyone. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
And that's a wrap for episode 20 here of the podcast. If you've made it this far, thank you very much. Please, if you can, give me 5 stars on Spotify or subscribe to the YouTube channel here at Training Model. And again, those 5 pre-launch Wormhole offer spots are available. That'll be the first link down below. I also have the programs listed down below as well. I'd recommend getting the bundle so you can have access to both the upper, lower, and all of the resources that are included within those programs. So please check those out. Jack, his socials and his ebook is also linked down below. So if you want to learn more from Jack, I'd recommend following him and grabbing his ebook and projects and his ebook and program for his acceleration monster product. So thank you very much. If you did make it this far, help me out by tagging us and sharing us on socials. Yeah, thank you.